Hello dear fashion designers, welcome to my YouTube channel. If you're new here, you're welcome, and if you're a returning viewer or a subscriber, thank you so much for tuning in again. So in today's video, I'll be showing you how to cut a 6 pieces blouse on your fabric without wasting the fabric. I have a video on the pattern. If you want to cut on a pattern paper, I have a video on how to cut a 6 pieces blouse. I'm going to leave the link above. I'm going to leave the link on the description, or I'll leave the card above. All right, so let's get right into it. So here is the lining of my main fabric, and that's where I'm going to be taking my markings. First, I'm going to go ahead to fold it into two. It's folded into two, not into four. And then I'm going to go ahead to mark my starting line. From the starting line, I'm going to go down by ½ inch for the sewing allowance. Okay, this is very important. So after I've marked out my sewing allowance, from that point, I'm going to go ahead to mark the remaining of the horizontal lines. That's my nipple point, which is 9.2.5 inches. Then my underbust, I'm going to mark 12 inches for my underbust, and then for my waist, I'm marking 15 inches for my waist. After that, next I'm going to mark my blouse length, which is 23.5 inches, and I'm going to go down also by 1 inch for my sewing allowance. So that is it. I'm going to go ahead to take that same measurement some inches away so as to have an accurate straight line. So I'll just go ahead to use my ruler to roll it, and I've gone ahead to label it so that we can see it. All right, next I'm going to take my nipple to nipple, which is 3.5 inches plus ½ inches. That's going to be 4. I'm going to take that right from my shoulder down to the blouse length. So after taking out my markings like this, I'm going to go ahead to use my ruler to connect all the dots together, and here we're going to have a straight line just like this. And on the starting line here, I'm going to mark 1/4 inch, that's 0.75 inches. You can choose to mark 1 inch if you want to, but I prefer to have unequal dots between my lines. All right, so that means if you've noticed or you've watched my video over time, you will see that I don't take 1 inch on both sides. I take 1/4 inch and 1/4 inch. All right, so on my underbust, I'm going to do the same thing, mark 0.75 inches on the underbust and the waistline. That's for the underbust tightening, and I'm going to go ahead to use my curve ruler and then connect everything together. After that, on this part here, on the hem line bottom part, I'm going to mark 3 inches. All right, this is to cut out the flare for the 6 pieces. That's the flare part. All right, you can choose to use 2.5 or 3.5 inches if you want to. So this is what we have. I'll just go ahead to cut it out just like this. So after I've cut it out, I'm still going to place it just like this on the fabric, all right, to cut the hem of the other side of the blouse. All right, so I'm going to go ahead to pin it down like this, and then I'm going to cut it out just like this. Now I'm cutting out this part alone. All right, that's the side front that is going to connect to the center front. So after that, I'm going to go ahead to just correct my straight line, and I'll go ahead to label the part so that we are going to be able to identify what is what. So on the shoulder line now, you can see I place my tape rule on the first pattern, that's the center front, okay, to know what's the measurement that is there, and that's 3 inches. I'm going to take that away, okay, starting from that point to measure the remaining part of my shoulder. All right, I hope you understand that. The center front, I'm going to measure that, and then to complete the measurement, I'm going to place my tape rule out just like this. and then mark our complete shoulder. So for the shoulder, I'm marking 8 inches. Now let me explain this. Next, I'm going to go ahead to mark my chest line. So my chest line can be gotten by dividing my bust divided by 6 plus 1.5 inches. So I'm going to go ahead to add 1/4 inch for my shoulder slope to the chest line, and I'm going to just mark that out just like this, okay? So you mark your chest line plus your shoulder slope while you are doing this. Now for the bust measurement, I'm going to go ahead to mark what I have on the center front first, and then I'll push my tape rule out just like this to complete the measurement. And for my bust, I am marking 9 inches for the bust plus 1 inches for joining at the bust area, and then 1.5 inches for my sewing allowance. So I'm just going to mark that. Next, on my waist, I'll measure what I have also on the center front here, then push my tape rule out, and then I'm going to mark 7 inches, 7.5 inches for my waist plus 1 inches for the side allowance, and then 1.5 inches for the sewing allowance. So I'll just go ahead to just put my ruler to the side just like this, okay? You can choose to measure it, but that's what I have left on my fabric, and I'm going to just go ahead to use that. Now at the hem of the blouse, I'm going to go up by 1 inches on both sides just like this, and then you just connect it like this, okay? Just form a curve, all right, so that it's going to sit well on the hip area, and then you just go ahead to cut it out. I've not cut out my arm curve, so the best thing to do is to join the sides together. Then you can now remeasure your shoulder and then mark your arm curve. It's best that you do the joining, you sew it down first, then you now take your shoulder measurement and you can now draft out your armhole curve. But for this tutorial here, I'm going to go ahead to use my pin to pin down 1/2 inches. I'm going to now mark my shoulder slope, then I'll go ahead to also mark my armhole curve, and that's it for the front panel. So next, let's move to the back panel. So now for the back panel, I'm going to go ahead to mark my starting line, and I'll just do that just like this, and then just like we did for the front, we are going to go down by 1/2 inch for our sewing allowance. So from that sewing allowance line, we are going to mark 9 inches, that's for the bust dart, and then 15 inches for our waist. Our hem line 23 inches, that's 23.5 inches plus 1 inches for sewing allowance. So I'll just go ahead to mark the straight line just like this. Next, I'm going to mark our zip allowance, which is 1.5 inches, okay? That's very important. And if you want to add zip for the front, you do the same thing. Add your zip allowance to the front panel while you want to cut. All right, so I'll just go ahead to label it, our nipple point, waist, and the blouse length. So this is going to be our zip allowance area. So next, from that point, I'm going to mark 4 inches on the nipple point, on the starting line, on the waist, and then the blouse. Then I'll go ahead to mark our straight line just like this. So on that line at the waist area, I'm going to go in by 1/2 inches for our dart, and then on the hem line here, I'm going to go out by 3 inches. This way I'm going to connect our flare for the center back. So at the starting line, I'm going to go out by 0.25 inches, okay? This is just to form our shoulder dart, and then I'll connect it to the waistline just like this. All right, so next I'll just go ahead to pin it to secure it, and then I'll go ahead to cut it out. So this is what we have. I'll also take notches at my zip allowance area so as to identify where the zip allowance will start. So you can go in and iron or fold your zip allowance with iron, or you can just go ahead to use your pin. Okay, so I'll just place it on my fabric just like this. Now you guys need to pardon me, while I was marking, I didn't know that my camera was not working, so I'm going to just explain to you what I did here. I placed the center back on the fabric and then I cut the side out just like what I did at the front. Okay, so next for the markings, I'm going to explain what I did. Now the same way that we did for the front, I will take the center back measurement, that's the one that is on the fabric, and then subtract it out to get the remaining of my shoulder, and then I'll go ahead to mark it. From the starting line note, I now mark my chest line, which is 0.25 inches. All right, and I added 0.75 inches to it, and that is what we have. So in total, you add whatever you're going to use for your shoulder slope to your chest line, and then mark it down like this so as to avoid any mistake. So after that is done, next I just connected it together just like this down to the shoulder area. All right, for my bust measurement, I'm going to measure what I have on the center back, and then I'll subtract it just like this, and for that I have about 8.5 inches. All right, plus 1 inches for the joining, and then 1.5 inches for the sewing allowance, and this is what we have. All right, so I'll do the same thing as well on the waistline. Measure what I have at the center back, then I'll subtract it. All right, to now have the full measurement of my waist. My waist is 7 inches plus 1 inches for the joining, and then 1.5 inches for the sewing allowance. So that is how we arrived here. So I measured what we have at this point, which is about 2.5 inches. I took that same measurement on the bottom side or at the hem side. Okay, then I added 2.5 inches for the flare. So you can decide to reduce the side of the flare, and then for the front of the flare, you can use 3 inches also. So after that is done, I'm going to go ahead to go up by 1 inches like I did at the front panel, and then I'm going to connect it down to the center part just like this. Okay, just take note of the center. It's just to form a little bit of curl, and then join it to the M which you've cut earlier. So I'll do the same thing as well on the side front and this on the side back, and this is what we have. So this is how I arrived here. So next I'll go ahead to mark my shoulder slope, and then just connect it like that. But to have our neckline, like I said earlier, we will need to cut it out and then join it together. All right, so that's it on how to cut a 6-pieces blouse. It's very important that you cut out your notches and then you join it together before taking your neckline. So that is it for this video. Thank you so much for watching. See you in my next video. Bye.